Hello, I really hope you've enjoyed the lessons so far. We've certainly covered a lot of ground. We started off by looking at HTML and CSS, and then we moved on to a number of essential JavaScript features which we'll be using extensively. And then we looked at NPM packages and how we needed to use a bundler like Vite to incorporate them into our code. And then finally we moved on to Tailwind styling, and we looked at a Vite plugin which could be used to apply the Tailwind styling. It ran as a sort of preprocessor. This lesson is a major milestone because we're actually now going to take a step back and create a brand new project which will end up being our entire front-end user interface. But we're going to start with small steps, and the first step we're going to take is we're going to build the smallest possible React application so you can see what React is at the absolute sort of core. So just before we do that, I'd just like to refer you back to some code we wrote 2 or 3 lessons ago, which was this create button function. It's highly relevant to what we're about to do now. These 3 lines of code aren't very important, and I'll just sort of change the order of these just to make it flow a little bit more cleanly. So here's our make button function, and the first thing we did was we called this DOM function. So just to recap, a DOM function is a function built into the JavaScript runtime in a browser. And we called getElementID, and we supplied it with this string button location. And what we were saying is that please go off and find an element on the screen whose ID is button location. And of course, we created a div with that ID in the index.html. So when this function runs, it'll go off, it'll find this div, and it will return us a handle to it, or an object, which we can use to reference it. We then asked it to create a button element on the screen using this other DOM function called createElement, and executed this line. It would have created the button. It wouldn't be visible at that point, but behind the scenes it was a sort of button in waiting. And again, it would have handed us back an object which was a reference to that. And then finally we made this third DOM call, append child, which basically put the two together. It said add the button into the div. And you'll see that React is going to do something quite similar. In fact, we're going to use this getElementID call in exactly the same way in our React application. So let me just put this away for now, and I will open my file finder, and I'll create a new folder, React UI, which is going to contain a new project. I'll open it in VS Code, and I'll create that index.html file, and I'll use emit to scaffold it. Now the body is going to contain just a couple of lines of code that I've already got prepared. Here we are. And you can see the first one, no surprises, is a div with an ID of root. So this is where we're going to ask React to place application. And the second one is a script tag, and we're saying that the source code is in the source folder in a file called main.jsx. Now a JSX is a file extension which is used by React. It means an extended form of JavaScript. So probably easiest if I just create this file and show you what's special about it. So here's the folder. Here's the file main.jsx, and again I've got something ready to copy in. Here we go. I've copied that twice. Okay, so we can see now we're calling this getElementById call. Just like with the button, it's referring to this div id equals root over here, and the DOM function call will return as a reference to it, and we just hand that reference to another function called createRoot. createRoot is a React function call. We've imported it from a React library up here, and we're essentially saying, hey React, this is where we would like you to place React application on the screen at this root div element. We then tell React that we'd like to render our application, and we tell it what the application will contain, which is this, which as you can see is sort of regular HTML. This is not a valid JavaScript syntax at all. And that's why it's in a JSX file rather than a .js file. And we're going to run a little React utility program which is going to convert this from HTML into regular JavaScript functions, which will create what this HTML represents. So the JavaScript functions will create a paragraph block with hello world in the middle of it. We're not going to actually see that code. That's all going to happen behind the scenes, but that's what's actually going to happen. And the React utility is a Vite plugin. So let's just create a Vite config file, just like we did when we were working with Tailwind, Vite config.js. And this format should seem quite familiar to you because it's exactly the same as the Tailwind plugin, but here we've got React instead of Tailwind CSS. But apart from that, we're basically saying to Vite, before you start up the web browser, we'd like you to run this plugin, and that's going to convert this JSX into valid JavaScript. And that's it. This is our entire application. As you can see, there's literally one source code file. It's got 3 actual lines of code in it. And we've got this converter installed, which will convert this JSX source code to JavaScript source code. So to bring it all together, we need a package.json just to tell it where to find the libraries that we're using. And again, I've got this ready and waiting. At the top, we've got our script block for running Vite, and here these dependencies are the libraries that we'll be using when the program actually executes. So for instance, this createRoot call here is the React function which will execute when the program's running. But we're also making reference to the utility programs which are going to be run as part of the build process, the Vite web server and also the Vite React plugin. So with that, all we need to do is to do an npm install and then npm run dev. And hey presto, everything is up and running. So I'm actually going to bring this lesson to a close there. That's quite a lot to take in. In the next lesson, we'll look at how we can move this code out of here. We don't obviously want to render our entire application in the root. We can't write our entire application in between these parentheses. So we'll see how we can componentize this. So I'll see you in the next lesson.